Welcome back, everyone, and good morning. Thank you for sticking with us. I'm Kate Baldwin.
People you see flying behind us are our producers. There's a lot going on here during the break, especially during a special edition of CNN Newsroom. Now, we're talking about the George Zimmerman trial. The jury, of course, the focus of all the deliberations. They're the ones who did it. 6 people, all women, 16.5 hours over 2 days before finding George Zimmerman not guilty.
Now, none of the jurors have commented on the trial at this point. All of them through the court saying that they wanted to be left alone, but plenty of people are weighing in on why they think the prosecutors failed their case. To talk more about this, let's bring in some of our best CNN legal analysts. Paul Callan, a former prosecutor, Tanya Miller, and criminal defense attorney Midwin Charles, as well as Richard Gabriel. He's a jury consultant. Very key in this trial was the selection of this jury. Paul, I want to start with you. I mean, when the jury was asking about that manslaughter charge, we talked a little bit about this morning, but wanted to pick it back up again. A lot of people were thinking that it was a good thing for the prosecution, right? They've got options. They've got the second-degree murder charge that he was charged with, but now they've got another option, this manslaughter charge. But after a while, you kind of thought the jury was looking not to second-degree murder, but then manslaughter, and then they came with not guilty. Where do you think that process was? When they came with the question about manslaughter, everyone thought they're going that way.
Well, it's interesting, you know, and I've seen this happen in cases that I've tried. Sometimes a jury asks a question because a majority of the jurors are trying to convince a holdout juror to change the vote. My bet is that what happened here was all of the jurors, maybe 4 or 5 out of the 6, wanted to vote for acquittal. And one juror was saying, no, I think we should think about manslaughter. Let's have the judge read the charge back. So they asked that very vague question of the judge, can you tell us again what manslaughter is? Then the jury came back and they said, no, we don't need an answer to the question after all. I think the holdout juror probably changed her mind and voted guilty. I think that's probably what happened behind the scenes.
Yeah, unfortunately, none of us can be in there, but that's probably a good assessment.
Tanya, you were just listening, I hope, to what we were talking to Robert Zimmerman about. Very interesting. Asking him about his brother and his feelings about that night. Any regrets? He says, I don't like that word. It's not the right word. What he did that night was right, so it's still right today, and it is consistent that way. Is that what do you think about that? The notion that there is no sense of, boy, I wish I hadn't done that night. I wish it all hadn't happened. He does say he was dismayed when he learned that Trayvon Martin was dead. But the idea that there are no regrets.
Well, I think it's just, it sounds so harsh because so many people have looked at this case and they've said, well, if George Zimmerman had just stayed in the car, if he just listened to the advice of the 911 operator and not followed Trayvon Martin, we wouldn't be in this situation. And the idea that we can't even accept that responsibility for that, it seems a little bit disconnected, I think.
Now, Midwin, I want to bring you in on this. Another thing we talked with Robert Zimmerman about, and it's really kind of the forward-thinking question, is the fact that this might not be the end of legal battles for George Zimmerman. The fact that the NAACP and others are asking the Justice Department to file federal civil rights charges against him. Do you think that they have that case? Do you think that that is likely?
Well, it's a possibility. I mean, the federal government did step in a few months ago, actually, and open an investigation into this case. I believe they were looking into whether or not Sanford police had accurately handled the case from the beginning, whether or not those rights, Trayvon's rights, rather, had been violated in the sense where the Sanford police somewhat appeared to drop the ball when they didn't arrest Zimmerman right away. But in terms of criminal charges against George Zimmerman, federal criminal charges, it's possible. You never know whether or not he could be looking at hate crimes. After all, there is a litany of facts here that exists with respect to the fact that George Zimmerman profiled Trayvon Martin.
Richard Gabriel, let me bring you in here before we have to go for time. There is speculation this jury was 6 people. It's supposed to be under Florida law, a non-capital case, non-death penalty case. It was all women. People are talking about that, differences between men and women and whether they were relevant in the deliberations. Your take as a jury expert?
As a jury expert, I have to say it's not necessarily the women or the gender of this jury. It has to do with their individual personalities. In jury selection, 3 of these jurors had heard about the case and had opinions about the case. And to me, that's much more determinative. One talked about that they thought there was an altercation and the gun went off. One talked about rioting in Sanford. Another juror talked about this was a lesson that she taught her children. So whether those jurors brought those preconceived notions about the case into this, it's hard to say, but it's certainly something that all jurors who are dealing in high-profile cases struggle with, about separating the evidence that they hear in court versus what they actually have heard beforehand.
They had a very tough case in front of them, very passionate case made by the prosecution as well as the defense, and everyone, including the court, applauded their work as they were sequestered for a very long time. Thank you all. Paul, Midwin, Tanya, Richard, great to see you. Thanks so much for coming in on a Sunday. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right, so we now know, as we were just discussing with the legal panel, the verdict is in.
Yep.
All right, it's now all about...